right, everybody, let's just get into it. Seems like we just did this the other day. Time flies. Tempus fugit, as you say in Latin, or as the Latin said in Latin, I guess. Welcome back, everybody. Rick Wagner here. We're at KNZZ, KGLN. We're at a bunch of different stations, 92.7, 1100 AM, 980 AM, 101 something, 98.1, something else, and then a couple other things. So with that kind of precise information, obviously, you can find it anywhere. Anyway, we do appreciate it. We're also on the internet, and of course, the ships at sea. We welcome you as well. That's the old Walter Winchell thing. Walter Winchell used to do the radio in all the way into the 50s. But he used to say, I used to be able to do Walter Winchell's voice a little bit. I can't do it anymore. He had that. Welcome everybody. Yeah. Welcome once again to our show. It's the when all the ships at sea, he would say. Not that I ever heard him on the radio, but I did hear some old recordings, and I thought, he has an interesting voice for radio. And we're back. It's a good week, really. Obviously, we've had a great week as conservatives with the results in the Virginia election. Slate there, as most of you know out there, was the governor won, the lieutenant governor, Winsome Sears, who's really a spectacular person. Wish we'd have known a little bit more about her. I know that Mark Levin had her on his show a couple of weeks before the election, and more people should have them on. Now she's on a lot, just because they've discovered what a great person she is. I actually have a little interview posted on the show webpage there at the rickwagnershow.com, which is also politicalviking.com, either one of them. But the Rick Wagner Show will get you there, so will Political Viking. It's a .com. I should add that each time, since there's so many endings out there now. I have a little interview posted with her on YouTube. You can click on that and listen to it and watch it. It's pretty interesting. She's just a great person. So we had that. That was a great result. Probably should have won that race in New Jersey. There's a lot of, let's just say oddball things that happened right there in New Jersey with the vote, and it was very close. I'd be interested to see if anybody goes in and kind of sees what goes on there. It is New Jersey. I mean, you really can't even get upset. New Jersey as a state, come on. That's where, if you're sort of a regular kind of Tony Soprano type, that's where you live. And so it also has the highest taxes, property taxes in America. A lot of other taxes. I mean, California, if it weren't sticking their head above the sand, and then New York right after them. New Jersey probably the most expensive place to live. But they don't quite have some of the things that New York does. Well, especially New York City. Too often we think about New York as only New York City, but the state's really quite large, and there's some actually decent Republican districts in the state of New York. Not that we'd think of, not, like Buffalo or Albany or anything like that, but there are some and there's some nice places, too. It's a very pretty state. Not so much Manhattan now. Piles of garbage, no cops, no EMS service. Things are going pretty well there. The new mayor, Eric Adams, who's a little bit of a flake himself, but is light years ahead of Bill de Blasio. He's got his hands full. On local fronts, we had just great results. In the school board election here where I'm at, in the District 51, all three of the conservative candidates were victorious by good, healthy margins, which really makes me happy. And I'm hearing from a couple other places out there across western Colorado that they had some good results as well. I'm hoping to get a couple more emails from you folks in there to sort of hear about that. And nationally, a lot of school boards that were Dems or Libs, we should say, liberal types. Sorry, I don't want to diminish them with just an abbreviation. Got swept out, partly because a lot of these school board elections are not partisan, right? They love that. So you don't really know anything about the candidate anyway. And then without any kind of party attachment, you really don't know anything about them. Usually there's not enough money spent on private information. In other words, going to regular people. All the informational flow goes through the teachers' unions and stuff like that, so that there's a ready-made base to vote for their candidates. So overcoming that is really tough. Same thing happened here and a couple other your districts out there in the listening area. That you overcame that. That's not easy. These off-year elections, there's the off years, which are the, like the 2022s, and then you have the off-offs, which is like this one, the 2021s, where it's hard to get people aware of the elections. And with all mail-in ballots, it's tough. And folks turned out. Pat yourself on the back. There's a lot of change out there, so that's a good thing. Something I'm not so crazy about, on more of a national level, and there's a couple of stories on this, actually, that I posted on the webpage at therickwagnershow.com. And don't get confused, politicalviking.com also goes to the same place. And I have 2 or 3 others, but those are the 2 main ones that take you to the same page. It's these war games that a lot of people hadn't heard about. Senator Josh Hawley got on them, actually, but originally I'd heard about it. The British papers were all over it. There's a joint war games operation in California. I think it's at 29 Palms. For those of you that have been Marine Corps, been to 29 Palms, you know what a delightful area that is. And it's a joint exercise, and in this particular portion of it, Operation Green Dagger, it was called, the Marine Corps there, because that is Marine Corps base, and Her Majesty's, the British, of course, Her Majesty's Royal Commando, their commando teams had war games, and the commando teams actually numerically were, as I read it, were inferior in terms of smaller numbers, and still managed halfway through the exercise to roundly overcome the American contingent. The Brits were just very happy with this. So that's where I first heard it. And I would encourage you to look at this. I mean, the Daily Telegraph had a piece, the Sun in Britain, and then there was a piece in Forbes here in the United States, and then the Daily Mail had finally picked up a spot. And it's sad. It's a sad story. We have tremendous men and women in our military. And every time you look closely at something that the military is doing, you see how poorly led they are at the very top. It's disturbing and a little bit unnerving because long periods of relative peace, and let's face it, the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq have certainly had casualties, and in the beginning they were, very serious, but we've just sort of, our focus has been off of them. And we have had some decent generals and a lot of bad ones. General Milley, of course, concerned so much about white fragility and trying to understand white rage and ferreting out, our Secretary of Defense, Austin, ferreting out white supremacy in the ranks, that they're not giving the leadership and support to our military. And we're struggling. Now, the Brits, as I read this, and I got pretty interested in it, I read it pretty thoroughly, and I read some other things on it too. You might look at it, see what you think. I mean, the Brits have got a new strategy and some new equipment, but mainly a small squad strategy. They won this by halfway through this exercise. They had overcome, when they show a technical out of action in the war game, they had a little check mark by that person. And apparently they had a little check mark by almost all of the United States military about halfway through it. And apparently what they did is they have some new equipment, but they're really adopting these small squad commando tactics, and they're going after command and control areas. Our military has gotten very technical, very wonky. They are relying on sophisticated, but I think they're proving to be vulnerable systems. And the Brits have adopted an idea of disruption command and control, because everybody has relying on all sorts of fancy gadgets, and when they go down, there's not the leadership available for it because everything's being done electronically, apparently. So it's interesting. Take a look at that. I think it says a lot. I mean, imagine it's just society as a whole. Imagine tomorrow if a foreign power did an EMP, right, electromagnetic pulse. Let's say they didn't do anything else, because God, Lord knows that could be terrible. Let's say it just took out the cell phones, all the cell service in, say, the Eastern Seaboard. Boop. It would take out a lot more than that, but suppose that happened. What would happen to things? So you can imagine that even though we harden the equipment lines and try and prevent EMP-type disruption, because you can generate EMPs in different ways, in the military, an over-reliance on very technical, very wonky, and very fragile systems, no matter how gee-whizzy they are, can make you vulnerable in that area. It's if you put all your eggs in one basket, you got to really watch that basket. So I'm very interested to see some more analysis on this. But take a look at this. Senator Josh Hawley was pretty all over it. He said very clearly that our generals need to start paying a little more attention to war fighting and a little less to politics. You know, you could have that same speech about generals back to the year, I don't know, 900 BC probably. There's always bad generals. There's always generals who think they're politicians, or politicians who think they're generals. That's our military, and our men and women in it. They need to be led properly, and we need to make sure we're watching that, and our representatives are watching that. Military serves at the pleasure of the civilians and our elected representatives in this country, and that's you. Anyway, take a look at that. We'll be back in a minute.